memories was him deciding to try and teach me Italian, and he started to speak in Italian, and I screamed and stuck my fingers in my ears because I didn't like the sound of this strange language coming from my daddy.
How interesting.
Yeah, and so his mistake was he should have just always talked to me in Italian, and then I would be fluent instead of speaking it really badly.
Well, I can always. No, my dad first language Fijian, but I can remember him being in Nelson talking to his mother and saying, "My goodness, I'm losing the language." You know, so he was losing the language over time, and he could really feel it. You know. But with us is Dr. Nasir Mohammed, lecturer at the University of Auckland's Faculty of Education and Social Work. Dr. Mohammed, welcome.
Thank you.
So you've heard what both Nikki and Rajorshi have said there, and you've noticed this challenge even in your own family?
I have, yes. I completely agree with what's already been said there, that the primary effort has to come from the home environment, and that children have to feel that their all the aspects of their culture are valued so that they feel that strong sense of identity and belonging. But children are very much influenced by their peers and spend a lot of time at school. So it's that they're pulled in two different directions. That sense of identity they want to have with the home culture, as well as wanting to assimilate into the New Zealand culture, particularly if you're a new migrant to the country. Yes, I am experiencing it with my own children,
right.
Who are increasingly using more English than Te Wehi.
Why is it important? Why do you think it's important?
To preserve the language?
Yeah.
Well, I think from a broad society perspective, I mean, New Zealand schools have got a very wide range of different ethnic groups, more than 100 different languages, and children from more than 140 different countries of birth. So I think it's important to protect and preserve that linguistic and cultural diversity. Not an easy task, I know, but it would be very sad to see a lot of that culture and languages being lost as a result of migration. For the individual, I think the identity is linked very much to sense of well-being, so how happy you are, how healthy you are. Also, from an academic perspective, it's also linked to how children feel about their ability to achieve in school. So that's why I feel that it's important to bring in that aspect of how much they feel they belong in school.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for being with us. Dr. Nasir Mohammed, their lecturer in the University of Auckland's Faculty of Education. Linguistically, do you wish you'd learnt Italian?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm still trying to learn it. Yeah, because I've got lots of family there and they don't speak English. So,
really?
And I mean, actually, Google Translate is really great now, you know, if you're sending emails or on Facebook or whatever. But I would love to be fluent.
What about you, George? You know, being for some time in New Zealand now, are there phrases or words that you'll often sort of forget, or, you know, like my father go, "Oh, what's the phrase there?"
Mine is the opposite, which is to try and... I still talk to my parents. My one way of keeping my Hindi alive is I talk to myself in my head in Hindi. So I talk to my parents in Bengali, I talk to myself in Hindi, and while I'm here, I'm also trying to learn as much Tereo as I can.
All right, Rajorshi Chakabori, Nikki Pellegrino, thank you so much. Thanks, Emil, for putting the week together. See you next week.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Tonight, Tainui leaves the door open to buying back disputed ehumato. The Ukraine vows to prosecute those selling the banned manifesto of the accused mosque gunman. Is the government looking at an inquiry into state-owned insurer Southern Response? Are the resignations of, quote, 2 Pākehā men from the government's Justice Advisory Group a loss? And the military moves in following riots in Indonesia's Papua province. The upside to unrelenting rain in Auckland, apparently there is one. And the soul sister who has spent 70 years, yes, 70 years working in a Wairarapa shoe store. And Baba bald sheep, have you any wool? Yeah, nah. We talk to Farmer Brown. RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata with tēnei. More than $90 million have been approved to fund the proposed Hamilton to Auckland rail service today. The Transport Minister Phil Twyford says the money will allow the project to go ahead. The service is expected to roll out of Frankton and Hamilton in the middle of next year. It will stop at the base in Rotokauri before going on to Huntly and finally stopping in Papua in Auckland, where passengers can change onto the Auckland public transport network. Future stops of the service may include Te Kaupata, Pōkeno and Tuako. Nearly $80 million of the funding comes from the Transport Agency and the rest is from local authorities. Waikato local bodies have welcomed funding for the new train service. The chairman of the Waikato Regional Transport Committee, Hugh Verco, says it's brilliant news.
We've been working on this project to getting the passenger rail between Hamilton and Auckland for 2 years now, and it's been positive all the way, but it depends on government support with the funding that we're asking for, and that the New Zealand Transport Agency today have confirmed the funding is absolutely brilliant news for the future of the Waikato.
A consortium of local bodies involved in the planning says work on facilities can now go ahead. Hamilton City is focusing on improvements to the Frankton rail station and building a transport hub at Rotokauri. The Waikato District Council will look at upgrades for the Huntly railway station. Waikato Tainui and the Kingitanga have not ruled out buying back Ihumatao to put an end to the South Auckland Maori land dispute. They say it is one of many options that will be considered during the delicate resolution talks which are underway. Our Maori News correspondent Lee Marama McLaughlin reports.
Kingitanga spokesman Rahui Papa says no deal has been struck to buy the land from Fletchers, despite media reports this morning. Mr Papa says although no decision has been made, Waikato Tainui are open to buying it. Such a move would mean the government could avoid being involved in setting uncomfortable precedents like buying private land for iwi and dealing with iwi who have already settled. Throwing a spanner in the works, Senior Government Minister Shane Jones suggests that if Tainui does buy the land, it could develop it themselves. Today, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says she will visit Ihumatao at some stage. Ko Lee Marama McLaughlin, tēnei.
WorkSafe says it's lucky no one was killed when a giant tree toppled down at a central Auckland daycare centre. 4 young children and a teacher were injured when the tree fell over at Discovery's Educare Centre in Epsom in November 2016. The daycare centre was prosecuted after a WorkSafe investigation found the tree had been dead for more than a year. Today it was fined $172,000 and ordered to pay $46,000 in reparation at the Auckland District Court. WorkSafe spokesperson Danielle Henry says it's lucky no one died.
This was a potentially catastrophic incident. We're really lucky that nobody was killed. Workplaces have a duty to protect their workers, and in this instance we also have vulnerable children exposed.
Heng Tong Investment, which leased the property to Discovery's Educare, was also prosecuted and fined over the incident. A slow but steady trickle of people have been handing in their firearms as part of the gun buyback and amnesty in Otago today. In March, the government restricted ownership of semi-automatic weapons in response to the Christchurch mosque massacres. The accused gunman had been a member of the Bruce Rifle Club in Milburn near Milton. Over 4 hours, Otago firearm owners handed in their now prohibited firearms, accessories and other weapons in Milton at the Toko Rugby Club. One firearm owner, who asked to remain anonymous, drove about 2 hours to dispose of his shotgun.
The firearms that are going to be handed in, we don't need them anyway. You don't need them in New Zealand. There is alternative firearms there, and they've made it very fair, and it's a good thing to get rid of them.
The buyback will continue tomorrow in Orwaka, Reefton, Newtown in Wellington, Taumaranui and Kawerau. Workers at Sandford's Bluff Fish Processing Factory are looking forward to big pay rises after voting unanimously to accept the company's pay offer. The union E2 says the deal, which follows wage bargaining last week, means 98% of Sandford Bluff workers will now be earning the living wage or more of $21.15 an hour. The deal is backdated to June 15th, so workers who lost their jobs after restructuring at the plant earlier this year will also get a share.
Watercare says it needs a lot more rain to fill up Auckland's dams, despite rain falling every single day this month. The National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research says a weather station has recorded 23 straight rain days. It says as the rain may continue to fall, August could come close to breaking the record of 28 rain days in a month. But Watercare's Rosalind Klein says the region needs more rain.
Our water storage level has risen 4% in the dams to 75.7% last week. And while we're really pleased that this is heading in the right direction, the historical average for this time of the year is 89%. So we still have a significant deficit.
Rosalind Klein says they still want people to be conscious of how much water they are using. It's 5:05. The covers are off, but a wet outfield has delayed the start of day 2 of the second and final cricket test between the Black Caps and Sri Lanka in Colombo. New Zealand must win to draw the series. Sri Lanka will resume their first innings on 85 for 2 with captain Dimath Karunaratne on 49. The Australian cricketers have some work to do after being bowled out for 179 on the first day of the third Ashes test in Leeds. Jofra Archer picked up 6 wickets for the hosts. England will start their first innings on day 2 tonight. Australian opener David Warner, who made 61, says it's up to their bowlers to keep them in the game.
We've always got to come out and hit the right lines and lengths. Now, I think the weather's quite hot, so look, it could dry the wicket out a lot. It's a fast-scoring outfit as well, so we've got to hit the right line and length, as I said, and try and shut the scoreboard down. But for us, it's about discipline. That's the challenge.
David Warner. New Zealand golfer Lydia Ko has made a poor start to the Canadian Open in Ontario, carding a 1 over par 72 to be tied for 82nd. American Annie Park leads on 7 under. Wallabies coach Michael Shaker has named David Pocock in his Rugby World Cup squad despite concerns over the loose forward's fitness. Pocock hasn't featured since a test against Italy last November and barely played Super Rugby this year. And Wellington host fellow winless side Canterbury tonight in a bottom of the table Mitre 10 Cup Rugby Premiership clash. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Country Life is following the honey after 9. The Minister of Finance selects the mixtape. Speaking of money, the Phoenix Foundation is our Friday Night Live act, and Ben Mallet presents a brief guide to the element silicon, a common ingredient in this week's Sonic Tonic topic, sand. From castles to deserts to William Blake to Hearts of Glass, it's all on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Central High Country. Rain, possibly heavy, turning to scattered showers tonight, but clearing Bay of Plenty. Isolated thunderstorms about Northland tonight. Whanganui to Kapiti, patchy rain clearing, then fine apart from isolated showers. For Wellington, a few showers clearing tomorrow morning. Gisborne to Waitatapa, scattered rain tonight, a few showers tomorrow, clearing by the afternoon. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago, apart from Clutha. Mainly fine, but isolated showers until early tomorrow morning. For Clutha and Southland, a few showers retreating to the coast overnight. Bulla to Fiordland, isolated showers until the evening. Scattered showers returning to Fiordland tomorrow morning, spreading elsewhere by tomorrow afternoon. Chatham Islands, rain from the evening, possibly heavy, easing to the odd shower later tomorrow. RNZ National, it's 5:08.
Thank you, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Waikato Tainui and the Kingitanga have not ruled out buying back Ehumato to put an end to the Maori land dispute in South Auckland. But they say no deal has been struck despite rumours that they're about to reach into their own pockets to fix the problem. Our Māori News correspondent Lee Marama McLaughlin reports.
Rahui Papa's phone has been going off since 6:30 this morning when News Hub dropped a bombshell reporting that Tainui was about to buy back Ihumātao. But the iwi and Kingitanga spokesman was quick to pour cold water on the claims.
So there's no deal, there's no resolution at this stage, and all of the media speculation is unfounded.
Through the cold and rain, protesters have been occupying Ihumātao intensively for a month now in a bid to stop Fletchers from building 480 houses at the site. So the rumour that the iwi was set to buy the land from Fletchers for just under $40 million had people thrilled that a resolution had finally been reached. Waikato Tainui is a commercially savvy powerhouse iwi worth more than $1 billion. And while Rahui Papa says no decision has been made, they are open to it.
That'll have to be something like a bridge that is crossed when we get there, because it has to have a really comprehensive appetite with the ahika and with the kingitanga.
This would potentially be a clean way of resolving the issue. Government ministers are concerned that buying the land would open a can of worms because, as a rule, the Crown won't purchase private land back for treaty settlement. Plus, the mana whenua involved have already settled their claims, so buying them land after the fact may also set an uncomfortable precedent. But they're moot points for protest leader Pania Newton, who doesn't think iwi should be buying the whenua.
Personally, I don't think it's moral or ethical. This is an issue between Maori and the Crown, and I think the Crown should be taking responsibility.
Delicate talks are continuing between the kingitanga and mana whenua groups to get them all on the same page before they negotiate with Fletcher's, Auckland Council and the Crown. Yesterday, hundreds of protesters marched from Ihumātao to the Prime Minister's electorate office in Mount Albert to deliver a 26,000 signature petition asking her to visit them. Jacinda Ardern says she's letting them do their own thing first.
I have never ruled out visiting. For me, it's just all about making sure that I respect the process that's underway, that's being led by kingitanga. But I will visit Ihumātao. That's been a no question for me. It's all just a matter of timing.
As for speculation about Tainui, Senior Government Minister Shane Jones says the protesters are soon to confront the reality of hard-nosed trade-off politics. The New Zealand First MP says the Ihumātao land near the airport is hugely valuable and is suggesting Tainui could choose to develop it themselves.
And I'm no doubt that Tainui, when they come back, if they do want to do a transaction, they'll be pragmatic. But I've got no time for this fairy tale notion that the land around the Auckland airport is wreathed in some sort of ancient tapu mist.
On Wednesday at the Koroneihana celebrations, the Maori King Tūheitia said it would take time to get consensus from mana whenua. His flag flew high at Ihumātao today and it will remain in place until a resolution is found. For Checkpoint, Corley Marama McLaughlin, TNA.
It is 5:12 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Do let us know what you think about that. Is that the solution for Tainui to step in and purchase the land, or should that be the government's responsibility? You can get in touch with us on 2101. Text us or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The former Minister for Southern Response, Megan Woods, says while it's too early to call for a criminal investigation into the state insurer, the issue of the double DRA and hidden costs has been known for years. A High Court ruling last week found that Southern Response's behaviour was deceptive and misleading when it hid a higher costing from the Dodds family when the state insurer settled their claim. A similar case in the Supreme Court in mid-2015 over a house owned by Avonside Holdings found that Southern Response left out the cost of demolition, contingencies and professional fees in the settlement. Megan Woods told Checkpoint today that she had received correspondence from hundreds of dissatisfied customers of both Southern Response and EQC as Minister, some relating to DRAs. Logan Church asked Megan Woods who knew about the two-quote system.
Well, I've asked officials about that. Southern Response certainly knew that there was a live question. They would have been receiving correspondence around it as well. I'm assuming they told the Minister, the previous Minister.
Because the Minister earlier this week said that the first he heard of it was last Friday. Is that plausible?
Well, I'm not sure. And they're questions that you have to put to the previous Minister. I can't say what he asked his officials and what he was told.
So, are you able to, I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, but off the top of your heads, how many claimants have come to you directly over this issue, over the double DRA?
Oh, look, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I've received hundreds and hundreds of letters over the 2 years that I was, less than 2 years that I was Minister for both Southern Response and EQC, and I couldn't tell you how many were around the specific issue. But what we did do, that everybody who sent me a letter, that we took it seriously, and we made sure that that information was channeled back into the agency, because of course as Minister people often thought that I had the ability to settle their claim, and of course I don't. In fact, exactly the opposite. But I did always give an undertaking to people that I'd make sure that their concerns were heard reviewed by either Southern Response or EQC, so all that correspondence was sent through.
So on that, how many meetings did you or your office facilitate between customers and the Chief Executive of Southern Response? We obviously heard from one couple yesterday who met with the Chief Executive, Anthony Honeybone. How many similar meetings were facilitated?
Oh look, a number of the letters that I received, we would forward through, or my office, or usually my office would forward through, and ask Southern Response to take a serious look at it, that people had taken the time to write to a minister and raise concerns. So what I'd do is I'd ask Southern Response to have a look at this case and to try and a resolution for those claimants.
So you mentioned that you've had hundreds of letters come through regarding both Southern Response and EQC. Do you think Southern Response has treated its customers fairly?
Oh, look, I think that certainly a number of concerns have been raised with me. And look, I mean, I raised concerns when I was an opposition MP as well. But one of the things that when I became minister, I made it really clear how I expected claimants to be treated. The other thing that we did, of course, was set up the Greater Christchurch Claims Resolution Service. So there were other ways for people to have their claims settled. And now, of course, we've got the tribunal up and running. So that there's yet another pathway for people to get their claims settled if they're not satisfied with the direct contact they're having with their insurer, whoever that may be. So it's something I took really seriously in my time as Minister, of making sure that we could find ways in which people could be treated fairly to get resolution of their claims.
So just to be clear, you didn't think that Southern Response was treating its customers fairly and something needed to change?
Oh, look, I think in terms of the sweeping statement of fairly, certainly where there were instances where I thought that people certainly didn't feel like they were being heard. That was something that I would ask Southern Response to take a look at, where people took the time to write to me. I think that's what they deserved, that they were asking someone to listen to them, and that was my job. And certainly I always asked both the EQC and Southern Response to listen to the concerns that claimants were voicing.
It's quite interesting because the High Court ruling last Friday took that a little bit further in the Dodds case, when they said that Southern Response had been deceptive and misleading. What was your reaction to that announcement from the High Court, that ruling?
I think that it is a shame that clarity wasn't brought at the time of the Avonside decision around exactly what would happen with those claims that were settled before that this is another one of those issues that has just been allowed to go on far too long. And it's certainly why we have taken steps since we've come into government to make sure that we can find ways to get people to get back on with their lives. I don't think the previous government did enough to find clarity. I don't think the previous government did enough to make sure that we had the end in sight, and that's something that we have been determined to do. I am disappointed to read that decision in terms of the way the people were treated, and that is not something that we made clear that we would want people to be treated in that way.
How far do you think that misleading and deceptive behaviour goes within Southern Response?
In terms of misleading and deceptive behaviour, I would like to think that we've caught it all. The Avonside decision did draw a line in the sand. It is now a question of what the properties that were settled before that, in terms of those DRAs. We've got a court ruling. There is now a decision to be made by Southern Response about whether or not they appeal that decision. But in terms of making sure that people get treated fairly, that has been an absolute priority for me in the time that I was the minister, and the reason why the Greater Christchurch Resolution Service was set up, so people did have an alternative place to go in order to get independent advice, to get free legal help, to get access to engineering support, all the things that were needed to get their claims settled. So my concern of making sure that people were treated fairly has always been at the forefront of my mind.
Does Southern Response owe its customers an apology?
Look, I think we need to work through the issues. Certainly, we've already had an apology from Southern Response in terms of the use of Thompson and Clark.
That's very different, though, to this issue.
What I'm saying is that we've already had a number of occasions where Southern Response has apologised to its customers. Look, I don't think that the way that Southern Response has behaved throughout its history has been up to standard. I've never resiled from that point. In fact, it was me that referred the behaviour around the use of Thompson and Clark through to the State Services Commissioner, because there were questions there when I read documents that just didn't sit right with me. That I think that we need to make sure that we are treating people fairly, but I also think some of that leadership needed to come from the from the politicians that were involved as well. I've made it really clear how I expect claimants to be treated in the time that I was Minister, and I have absolute confidence that Minister Robertson will do that now that he is Minister. I don't think that we had that leadership under the previous government.
What thought should be given to a criminal investigation into Southern Response?
Oh, look, it's too early to say that, and that is something that the Minister who is responsible for Southern Response would need to answer.
What do you mean it's too early to say that?
Well, there's still decisions being made around whether or not to appeal the decision, but that is a question that you need to put to the Minister who is the Minister responsible for Southern Response.
I've previously asked you about a public inquiry into Southern Response. Since then, obviously more has come to light. Do you think there needs to be some sort of inquiry into Southern Response? And would you support such inquiry? The key thing for the Minister who will be responsible for handling the inquiry on the Earthquake Commission when it comes back, who of course will be Minister Robertson now, is that we have actually asked Dame Sylvia Cartwright in the course of the EQC inquiry to look at the interplay with other insurers as well. That's not a question I think we should answer till we get back the piece of work that Dame Sylvia is working on. I've heard nothing but positive reports from within the community about the way in which she's engaged with people and about the fact that she is that she's really getting into the issues that were there with EQC, and by definition that will include the interplay with private insurers, because a number of those properties that went over cap obviously involved the other insurers as well. So I don't think that we can answer that question till we see Dame Sylvia's work.
And that's former EQC Minister Megan Woods. Southern Response says it will not be commenting during the 20-day appeal period. The current EQC Minister, Grant Robertson, declined to be interviewed. But earlier this week, Jerry Brownlee, who was EQC Minister from 2011 to 2017, said that he first heard of the double DRA system when the Dodds ruling was released last Friday. So Logan Church went back to Mr Brownlee today to ask him if he stood by his comments.
Well, I think if Megan Woods is saying that she knew about this in opposition, I'm very surprised that she didn't make some sort of advocacy approach to me as the Minister. I was not looking at the day-to-day activities of Southern Response. We were looking at the overall picture. Remember that we were engaged in a numerous areas of recovery throughout that time. And we were very much relying on the letter of intent and expectation of that, and we're getting reports that most definitely were showing that progress is being made. Bearing in mind that this was a run-out insurer, and that effectively the value of the insurance policies that any of the AMI Christchurch customers had was effectively extremely minimised as a result of the neglect from the AMI board, and we just wanted them to be dealt with as fairly as possible, given that the taxpayer was paying.
I see. So in your position as Minister, you sort of trusted Southern Response to just do its job?
That's the way most state-owned enterprises tend to operate. And whenever there was controversy, I was obviously asking questions, but details about how they went about assessments and ultimately either settlement proposals or rebuilds was not something I did. I tell you what I did do, though. I never advised anybody to take a cash settlement. I frequently advised people to go down the full repair or rebuild option if it was in front of them.
The Avonside Holdings case came out while you were Minister responsible for Southern Response, and that case sort of pertains over a similar issue as the Dodds, which was Southern Response withholding information pertaining to the actual cost of repairs. Were you aware of that ruling?
Well, as I said, we would have expected Southern Response to respond to the requirements that, or put in place requirements that reflected the essence of that ruling. Look, can I also say that it's very, very easy for someone like Megan Woods to look backwards and say how clever she was to know what was going on at the time. Remember that in total, there's 170,000 houses damaged in Christchurch. Many of those were over cap and therefore part of the Southern Response issue. Southern Response, in fact, had just under 40%, I think, of all the houses in Christchurch. So they were a very big player, no question about that.
So just to clarify, Mr. Brownlee, so you were aware of the Avonside Holdings case ruling, is that right?
I would have. I don't have an immediate I don't have an immediate recollection of everything that was in that case. I know that the Southern Response were being taken to court by some of the significant litigators around at that time. I would have been getting reports about the progress of litigation and ultimately about the decisions that came down from the court. Our expectation as shareholding ministers would have been that where the courts had declared something, that they should alter the operational practices to reflect those sorts of declarations.
So just to confirm, Mr. Brown, was any work done at a ministerial level as to what the implications of that particular ruling would be? Because it's a very similar sort of case to the Dodds' case in many ways.
Just back the bus up a little bit. All we were constantly getting was revised increased costs coming through. We didn't balk at any of those. We recognised that was what was likely to happen, given the time that was being taken and the way in which the changes like building codes and everything else were having an effect on the outcome. So I have to be quite blunt with you. I was not engaged in the day-to-day operations of Southern Response and would not have been familiar with the individual cases, given the vast numbers of them. I think it's very easy to tear down Southern Response. Remember that had the government not stepped in, all of the claimants to AMI would have been in considerable trouble. If the government had left it to a normal commercial solution, then all of the policy holders for AMI would have been liable for that end cost.
Southern Response says it won't be commenting to us while the window to appeal the Dodds' judgment is still open. A member of the government's Justice Advisory Group says the resignations of, quote, two Pākehā men isn't going to derail the work that's already been done. Just Speak spokesperson Julia Whaiputi acknowledged the departure of Jared Gilbert and Warren Young, but says it would have been far worse if Maori members of the group had quit. Mr Gilbert, a gang expert, and Dr Young, General Manager at the Independent Police Conduct Authority, quit the Justice Minister's panel in June. The group is set to disband later this month once it delivers its final report into the overhaul of the justice system. Our political reporter Joe Moyer has the story.
The advisory group, chaired by retired National MP Chester Borrows, has spent the last year gathering views and evidence from hundreds of people in a bid to improve the justice system. The Justice Minister, Andrew Little, says there were a range of reasons for the two resignations.
Some of the reasons for leaving amongst that group were either the work commitment was greater than expected or they'd contributed as much as they could. Of the two names you mentioned, one has maintained contact with the group and offered to assist, at least on communications issues. Another had left because he disagreed with where he thought the final report would end up.
Mr Little denies the resignations have cast a shadow over the work done by the group, and he expects the milestones he set out for the members to be met.
You expect there are going to be differences of opinion. How people handle those and how they manage them is up to them. From my point of view as Minister, having set up a group, what I expect to see is a report, a credible report, offering a path forward, addressing the problem that we all know exists. That's what I expect to get from them by the deadline set for them, and it looks like that's what they will deliver to me.
One of the group's remaining 7 members, Julia Whaiputi, agrees the final report won't suffer as a result of the resignations, pointing to the ethnicity of Mr Gilbert and Mr Young as a reason.
In terms of the membership that left, we lost 2 Pākehā men. And who is in prison?
Her comments didn't end there.
It would have been a more significant problem in terms of representation if Maori members had left. I truly believe that.
Julia Whaiputi says Maori are overrepresented in the justice system, and the only way to fix that is to find solutions for Maori by Maori.
If we're going to change the system, you've got to change the experiences of Maori, and therefore you should have more Maori around the table. That would be a no-brainer in terms of that process.
But Andrew Little believes the group was set up with diversity in mind.
It was deliberately set up to make sure there was a large number, for example, from a Māori background and experience, as well as others. I'd be most surprised if there weren't differences of view and differences of opinion, as there would be with any advisory group.
The National Party's Justice spokesperson Mark Mitchell is less than impressed by Ms Waiputi's comments.
To be honest with you, I'm shocked to hear that there was a comment made like that from one of the panel members. I don't even think it deserves a response. I'd hope that they'd go away and actually reflect on a comment like that and the inappropriateness of it.
The chair of the Justice Advisory Group, Chester Borrows, came out swinging when the panel was formed a year ago, saying political parties' self-interest in staying in power was to blame for the lack of progress in law and order reform. He called on politicians not to bow to public sentiment, to be tough on crime, and not to put the emotion of victims up against evidence. Mr Mitchell, a former police officer, says that kind of talk marginalised the voices of some members of the group right from the outset.
I think that it's healthy to have a group made up with different views, but it's not healthy if one part of the group feels like they've been shut down or they don't have a voice. And to me, looking from the outside in, it appears that maybe is what's happened.
Chester Borrows declined an interview with RNZ, as did Warren Young and Jared Gilbert. The group's final report is due to be delivered to Andrew Little next week. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Joe Moyer.
On Checkpoint on RNZ National, pressure mounts on ferry company Fuller's after yet more passengers are left stranded on the Devonport dock. A green corridor cutting through Christchurch's red zone gets the green light, and Sally Summers has been putting her best foot forward, working at a Wairarapa shoe store for 70 years. Yes, 70 years. We would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program so far today. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, and email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's get to the headlines now, though, with Susanna.
The government has approved more than $90 million to fund the proposed Hamilton to Auckland rail service today. The service is expected to start in the middle of next year. Nearly $80 million of the funding comes from the Transport Agency and the rest is from local authorities. A consortium of local bodies involved in the planning says work on facilities can now go ahead. The Waikato Regional Council says the Auckland and Hamilton metropolitan areas could double their population in 40 years, and motorways alone will not cope. Waikato Tainui and the Kingitanga have not ruled out buying back Ihu Mātau to put an end to the South Auckland Maori land dispute. They say it is one of many options that will be considered during delicate resolution talks now underway. Such a move would mean the government could avoid being involved and setting precedents like buying private land for iwi. Pressure is mounting on the Auckland ferry company Fuller's to hand over control of its operations to the City Council after a terrible few months. Yesterday, hundreds of passengers were left stranded in Devonport because of a mechanical problem. The company is also awaiting sentencing over an incident which left a passenger badly injured. WorkSafe says it's lucky no one was killed when a giant tree toppled down at a central Auckland daycare centre 3 years ago. 4 young children and a teacher were injured when the tree fell over at Discovery's Educare Centre in Epsom. WorkSafe found the tree had been dead for more than a year. Today the centre was fined $172,000 in the Auckland District Court and ordered to pay $46,000 in reparation. A Twizel resident lost their house in a fire this afternoon. Fire crews from Oamarama and Twizel were called to the Mackenzie Drive address about 20 to 4 and found the house well ablaze. No one was in the house at the time. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Time for business now with Kim Savage. Happy Friday, Kim.
Happy Friday, Lisa. The moment we all wait for, isn't it?
Yep. Honey healthcare exporter Comvita, it's been stung by new regulations as well as a poor harvest.
Yeah, so this is what the company's calling a perfect storm, really. So on the regulations front, it was a bit of a double hit for the company, really. So the market access into China, what happened was China changed some of its regulations around what it calls die-go customers, which, what does that mean? These are customers who buy products, particularly in the sort of the luxury sphere, and when we're talking about Comvita here, we're talking about Manuka honey products in that kind of healthcare sort of area. People buying products and then sending it to China or bring it into China on behalf of that company. So some regulations targeting those customers then flowed all the way through to Comvita's sales and margins. Not only that, but at the same time, the Ministry of Primary Industries here in New Zealand brought in regulations, tighter restrictions around the use of Manuka honey as a label going on products. So that characterisation of Manuka honey, it, I suppose, lifted the standard that it expects from products that have that label. So what the company says is that historically honey, which has been of what they call a lower potency, has actually qualified as Manuka honey, which is of course the sought after label that everyone wants overseas. But with those regulation changes, then it's meant that quite an amount of its honey is unable to be classified as Manuka honey, and then as a result, unable to be sold into some of these markets or I guess sold at a lower margin for them. So added to that, Comvita's apiary, which it owns here in New Zealand, Kiwi Bee, had a poor season as well. So we're talking about poor weather for cultivating the honey. So all of that, and then that combined with some asset write-downs, a significant chunk of asset write-downs, about $20 million worth, resulting in a net loss for the year of $27.7 million. And the company not overly happy with that, fairly disappointed. Last year, the company reported a net profit of $8.2 million. So a significant, I guess, downwards, that result coming really down for the company this year. So a strategic review is underway, as you'd imagine, after seeing some of the, or experiencing some of the things they've experienced externally and then finding issues with their apiary and things here. The review happening now and looking at both the supply side, so what they can do in terms of improving the supply side for their Manuka honey, but also looking at the demand side. And the company does have some positive thoughts about what it's doing in China at the moment. It does have what they call in-market distributions, where they can actually have a distribution company there in China, which is doing all the work there for them, and they can sort of access extra markets by doing it that way. So feeling more positive about the year to come than the year they've just had, most certainly.
So, and it seems like consumers have got a little touch of the winter blues.
Yes, it does. Retail spending, barely any growth at all in the second quarter, we found. So if we look at the official numbers, which have, of course, have been seasonally adjusted, 0.2% in the 3 months through to June, that's spending growth. So that's less than a third of the growth we saw in the first quarter. The weakest growth in more than a year. It seems we are not getting our wallets out this winter at this stage. So consumers, what we are spending money on, electronics, pharmacy items, such as cosmetics and liquor. Apparently, we're spending more on liquor as well. Department store spending, though, furniture, supermarket spending, and food and fuel were all lower for that second quarter. So why are we seeing this? And economists believe it's this thing we call the wealth effect, and that house prices, in fact, are to blame for this. We have seen a softening in the housing market, and what tends to happen in that case is that consumers or households spend less. So their feeling about the housing market, if it is not rising at the rate perhaps it has been, if that growth is a little bit softer, they just tend to just pull in the reins a little bit. Perhaps they're not going to go and buy that new lounge suite or the new dining table or the new cushions, I suppose, even. And so it just sort of curtails that spending a little bit. Also, of course, the other thing there is that as house prices don't quite grow at the same rate, of course, people's access or people perhaps not accessing the equity in their house quite the same way, or they can't quite borrow as much as they maybe would, obviously, if those prices are rising at a more rapid rate. And so these are just some of the things we're seeing in the sort of spending or retail spending area at the moment. And of course, that's only second quarter numbers, and we'll have to see what happens in the third quarter next. And that may tell us a bit more about what's going on with consumers.
Let's do a quick whip around the markets.
So if we take a look at the NZX 50 index, down close to 1%, 102 points lower, 10,622. And if we look at Comvita, the company I was talking about, the honey producer there, up about 13 cents, about 5% higher, $2.75. The New Zealand dollar at 63.8 US cents, 94.5 Australian. And just something to watch out for this weekend if you're a market watcher, someone who keeps an eye on the markets. Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which to a lot of people won't mean an awful lot, but to those who do keep an eye on the markets, it is going to be an interesting weekend. That is where an array of central bank governors and policymakers are meeting this weekend, and we are expecting to hear a speech from the Fed Reserve Chairman, Jay Powell, probably overnight tonight. I believe that's taking place. And so, of course, US markets will be open overnight tonight. They'll be looking for a bit of direction on what the Fed Reserve is thinking with regard to interest rate cuts, further cuts. And so we'll just be watching markets to see what happens there. And of course, whatever happens potentially could flow through to our own market next week. And we will certainly keep you updated on all of those.
Thanks, Kim. Have a fantastic weekend. That's Kim Savage with our business wrap this evening. There's growing international criticism about the wildfires raging through the Amazon, with the G7 being urged to put the international crisis at the top of its agenda this weekend. That call came from French President Emmanuel Macron, while the UN chief Antonio Guterres has also said he was deeply concerned by the fires. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro earlier said his government lacked the resources to fight the surge in fires in the world's biggest rainforest. Conservationists have blamed Mr. Bolsonaro's government for the Amazon's plight, saying that he has encouraged loggers and farmers to clear the land, resulting in an 85% increase in fires this season. The BBC's Camilla Motta reports from Sao Paulo.
Fire in the Amazon's rainforest. This is happening in the world's largest and most important ecosystem that's home to 3 million species of plants and animals and 1 million indigenous people. It generates more than 20% of all the oxygen in our atmosphere. This is what it's like at ground level. Brazil's had more than 73,000 fire outbreaks this year, and more than half have been in the Amazon. São Paulo, Brazil's largest city, is over 1,600 miles from fires. But this week, in the middle of the day, it was plunged into darkness due to smoke from the fires. In recent months, the country's president has ripped up environmental protections for the Amazon. Who does he blame for the fires?
Regarding the Amazon fires, I'm under the impression they could have been started by the NGOs because they'd asked for funding. What was their intention? To bring about problems for Brazil.
Protesters have blamed Bolsonaro's government for encouraging greater exploitation of the Amazon and weakening its environmental safeguards. This is how they greeted Brazil's environmental minister at a climate conference. Fires in the Amazon caused by people are fairly common at this time of the year, but it was the arrival of smoke from the blazes here in São Paulo that ignited outrage in Brazil and worldwide against the government's attitude towards the environment.
Camilla Motta with that report. Back home now, and a plan for a green corridor cutting through Christchurch's red zone all the way to the coast has been given the green light. Dubbed the Green Print, the plan supports the regeneration of the Otakaro Avon River corridor, which housed over 5,000 residents before the big quakes. Christchurch reporter Anand Zaki was at this morning's announcement.
Christchurch's residential red zone has been uninhabitable since the earthquakes, and nature has slowly taken over the vast open space with weeds growing through roads and plenty of bird life. That's where the Minister for Greater Christchurch Regeneration, Megan Woods, made today's announcement that the area will feature a green spine, ecological restoration, community spaces, potential trial housing and a trail. The Avon Otakaro network has advocated for a vision for the red zone for 8 years. Its spokesperson, Evan Smith, says today's announcement is a milestone moment in Christchurch's rebuild.
We were just thinking the other day, we've had over 100 monthly meetings of our strategic steering group to get to this point. It's been a long, slow slog, but it's been worth it in the end to get to this point. It's actually returning the land to what it wants to be, and it's a multi-purpose river park that runs from city to sea, and that's a really important taonga for this city.
Megan Woods spoke to the plan with a veiled warning that people will need to be patient.
The plan is about connecting communities with each other, with nature, and with new possibilities. While this is a great step towards regeneration of the area, people must respect that this is an intergenerational plan that will involve transformation over time.
Evan Smith says he's happy to wait and glad some projects are already underway.
I'm happy to see it as intergenerational, but things have started already. We've got a transitional river trail that runs out from the city right out to New Brighton. We have a little project over the way there. There's one of many transitional uses in the area, and more are coming on stream all the time. And I think you'll see that momentum build up with time.
Dr. Woods addressed concerns that the proposal for the rowing lake seems to have fallen by the wayside.
It isn't included in this plan. For me, I was convinced by the evidence that was in the documents that were given to me that there are still appropriate and reasonable questions that need to be answered.
Dr. Woods says a lake would need to go through a consenting process for examination. Christchurch Mayor Leanne Dalzell says people will still get a say on how the green spaces will look.
This is about everything all coming together. So our focus as a council will be very much on that green spine and engaging the community on how that is going to be developed.
The lead agency, Regenerate Christchurch, has come under pressure for the time it's taken to deliver the plan. Its chief executive, Ivan Iafeta, says he's had to consult widely and squeeze as many ideas into a single vision.
The starting point for us was understanding from a technical perspective what had happened to 600 hectares of land, and then to engage with the community to understand what their goals and aspirations were to develop the vision. Once we had whittled down sort of 5,000 ideas into broad land use categories, we then had to consider various land use combinations and assess those to determine which set of combinations achieved the vision.
With this plan now approved, Megan Woods can now turn her attention to the much-awaited multi-use arena. But she says she's still waiting on the final business case from the Christchurch City Council. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Anand Zaki.
It's about 14 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Do get in touch about anything you've seen on the program. Let us know what you think of those plans for that Avon River corridor. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. For 100 days, rain, hail and shine, Ollie Langridge has been camped out at Parliament with one message. He wants politicians to declare a climate emergency. Unfortunately, that call to action has not been accepted yet. Today, to mark his 100 days, Ollie was joined by crowds of others, young and old, in solidarity. Jonathan Mitchell was there.
At lunchtime, several hundred students, protesters and curious passers-by grabbed a billboard and cheered as Ollie Langridge took to the stage on Parliament's grounds.
Welcome everybody and thank you for being here today. I am humbled and overwhelmed by your support.
Watching on were politicians from Labour and the Greens, including Chloe Swarbrick, who has failed to get a climate emergency across the line in Parliament. However, she called for the crowd to be staunch in their beliefs and keep fighting.
The first step that you can make is to call it out and to demand action and to use your feet and not to switch off. Because divided we will never, ever, ever win this.
Protesters came from far and wide to be with Ollie Langridge today. Jane O'Shea travelled south from Hamilton.
Well, the Arctic's on fire. The Antarctic is starting to melt in a way that the scientists thought would happen at the end of the century. All the projections are at the worst possible scenario that has been put forward by scientists.
Meanwhile, Diane Cairns-Murphy, a grandmother, says the politicians need to act now.
I've got fabulous grandchildren. We need to leave the planet in a much better place than it already is. We're running out of time already to change it. I want them to have as good a country, as good a life as I had growing up, you know.
And high school student Rata, with a number of her mates, took the day off school to protest. She had this message to MPs.
You need to just make a change because climate change isn't going slower. It's not slowing down. It's actually speeding up. And you need to make a change and do it now because soon it's going to be too late.
Ollie Langridge says he's not giving up hope.
The goal of a climate change emergency has not been achieved within the 100 days, but that's not yet. So I live in a lot of hope, with a lot of faith and a lot of courage and determination that what we're going to do now is going to just make a lot more conversations happen in that building and a lot faster too.
He says he's copped a lot of flack from members of the public about his protest, including for having 5 children.
Occasionally people say, yes, what are you doing out here because you've got 5 kids, that's crazy, and they equate the problems around climate change to the number of children, and then that goes into overpopulation.
So what do you say to them?
I say, no, I don't believe you, I don't think that's true, and come and have a chat to me.
Ollie Langridge plans to scale back his protesting on Parliament's lawn to each Friday, in the hope that he'll be joined by many others to get the message across. In Wellington for Checkpoint, call Jonathan Mitchell, Tēnei.
Indonesia has sent thousands of soldiers to its province of Papua after widespread riots led to the burning of a provincial parliament building and tens of thousands took to the streets. But this time the violence has not been limited to the rest of province bordering Papua New Guinea, with a mob of Papuan students assaulted in Surabaya, Indonesia's second biggest city. Indonesia's president has been criticised for failing to condemn what many are calling a racist attack, and for his reaction of cutting internet access to Papua. Johnny Blades reports.
Unrest was triggered when dozens of Papuan University students in Surabaya were assaulted by a mob last week and later arrested. The students had allegedly disrespected an Indonesian national flag on the country's Independence Day anniversary. The Papuans' dormitory was quickly surrounded by a large crowd, including elements of Indonesian nationalist militia, calling the students monkeys and chanting "Papua, get out." These angry scenes were echoed in a standoff in the city of Semarang when civilian groups demanded Papuan students fly the Indonesian flag. A researcher with Human Rights Watch, Andreas Hassono, says anti-Papuan sentiment is on the rise in Indonesia.
Military-related militias are starting to increase their campaign against Papua by showing that the Papuan refusing to raise Indonesian flag, hoping that it will exacerbate the situation on the island of Java, Indonesia's most important island.
Footage of the racist harassment in Java spread quickly, sparking thousands to march in the streets back in Papua. In Papua's provincial capital, Jayapura, an estimated 20,000 people mobilised in the biggest demonstrations seen in the region for years, protesting against racism and calling for independence. In another large protest in Manokwari, unrest spilled over, with the provincial parliament building set on fire and roads blocked by burning tyres. Indonesia's President Joko Widodo made an appeal to Papuans.
Saya tahu ada ketersinggungan, oleh sebab itu
I know that there are hurt feelings, but as fellow citizens, the best thing is to forgive each other. It's okay to be emotional, but forgiving is better. Being patient is also better, and be confident that the government will continue to safeguard your dignity and prosperity.
But US-based Papuan independence leader Okto Mote says this response is disappointing.
Now, Indonesian president, he ignored what's going on, and then he said, oh, okay, guys, you just apologize each other. So West Papuan apology for what? He doesn't condemn the racism. He doesn't say racism is not right. So many years we experienced under Indonesian colonial the discrimination, racism we experience in everyday life.
Over the week, protests have spread to other towns in Papua, including Merauke, Biak, Nabire and Tamika. In the coastal town of Whakwhak, protests turned violent before shots were fired by security forces, with at least 2 people seriously injured. Deploying extra officers to Papua, Indonesia's government has cut internet access to parts of Papua in a bid to stem the flow of what it terms hoax news. In Manokwari, a local resident, Uthu Sawaki, says the city's streets have returned to an uneasy calm.
Police is still everywhere and the security is also good this morning, but still people are still afraid to go out from the house, just couples, motorcycles and cars, but it's not like in the past.
Indonesia has deployed around 1,000 more military forces to Papua to quell the unrest. But protests have continued through the week, including in the national capital, Jakarta, where West Papuans demonstrated in front of the presidential palace, displaying the outlawed Papuan Morning Star flag. Discrimination against Papuans is a long-running problem in the Republic, but the Surabaya incident has triggered a new momentum for Papuan independence, which has left Jakarta facing a crisis it may not have seen coming. This is Johnny Blades.
A Rotorua farmer is the proud owner of what he reckons is the ugliest lamb he has ever seen. One of a set of triplets, the lamb is woolless, basically bald, and a genetic rarity. There'll be no woolly socks or Spencer spun from this little baby sheep. I asked Javia Brown, aka Farmer Brown, what exactly the newborn looks like.
In my opinion, it is one of the ugliest lambs I've ever seen. Just because it was the runt of the litter out of the 3, but it's just special to all of us just because it's got no wool, I'm guessing. I'm saying.
So, ugly, you say. What exactly do you mean by that?
Her face sort of looks like a kangaroo, so hence the reason why we called her Skippy.
So,
after the kangaroo.
Like a bald kangaroo?
Yeah.
So, what did you know what it was when you were looking at? Did you know what was wrong with her?
Well, she was originally at our cousin's house because we let them have our sheep for a bit, and they called us saying, "Oh, we've got lambs." So Mum rushed over there and grabbed them and brought them back. And when I first saw her, I was just shocked. Didn't really know, is that actually a sheep or what?
So Skippy is one of a set of triplets. The other 2, what do they look like?
They're just completely normal, as you would say, just full wool, and them 2, they're fine.
Javia, can you just explain the skin then on Skippy?
It's hard to explain that one. It's like normal skin, but it feels rougher. Just there's a little bit buttered. Like a Sphinx cat, my mum says.
So like a bald cat?
Yep.
When did you realise it was a thing, a woolless sheep?
The moment we saw it. Because normal sheep are born with wool, and this one just didn't look right.
How rare is it?
Beats me. I haven't searched it up yet.
Hey, it's bloody cold at the moment, right? And down your way, I'm sure it's cold as well. So how's poor Skippy getting on?
At the moment, we have made her a vest. So just so she can keep warm, and we bottle feed her every 3 hours with warm milk, just for extra warmth.
So who whipped up this vest?
My mother.
So you actually made it specifically for the lamb?
Yep.
Oh, you've got to describe that to us.
Oh, it's... it's like what motorbike riders wear, just their vests that just cut off on the arms and everything. So that's cut off on the arms and legs, and he just got nice little vests just to keep him warm in winter.
So what's likely to be Skippy's fate?
We want her to live, obviously, just so we could see what she looks like when she grows up. So we've taken extremely good care of her, and we're going to keep doing so.
So Skippy will be a pet, sort of.
Yes.
A mascot, maybe.
Yes.
Even though Skippy is ugly, it sounds like you're kind of already emotionally attached to Skippy.
Just a little bit.
What's Skippy's character like? Personality?
She's shy. She's really shy, but once you get close to her and start bottle feeding, we're slowly getting her used to humans.
So do you think she knows she's different?
Yeah. I think she would, because she's the only one that gets bottle fed at the moment.
Special. Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
If there is someone listening who likes to sort of knit up a wee jumper or what have you, what's Skippy in need of?
Well, Skippy wouldn't mind a little scarf or something like that, some leg warmers.
Not ugly, just different. Check her out online. Let us know what you think. 2101 on the text.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata with tēnei. The ambassador of Ukraine says anyone distributing the accused Christchurch gunman's manifesto will be tracked down and prosecuted. A neo-Nazi in Ukraine is reproducing the document in paperback and selling it through an online messaging app. Ukraine's ambassador Dmytro Senik told RNZ the news is both surprising and disturbing.
Our law enforcement agencies now attempting to investigate on whether this information is true. And if it is, of course, there would be a prosecution, because Ukraine will not tolerate any manifestations of extremism or religious, racial hatred.
Ukraine has contended with a resurgent far-right in recent years, which has sprung up in the wake of its ongoing conflict with Russia. But Mr Senik says it's a peaceful country that doesn't tolerate hate. Waikato local bodies have welcomed funding for the new Hamilton to Auckland passenger train service. The government's transport agency has given the go-ahead with funding of $92 million for the service from June next year. Matthew Tunison reports.
The service will start with 2 morning and 2 afternoon trains carrying up to 150 passengers each from next June. It will leave Frankton and Hamilton, then stop in Rotokauri before going on to Huntly and finally stopping in Papua in Auckland, where passengers can change onto the Auckland public transport network. Local bodies involved in planning the service say work on the facilities can now go ahead. Waikato Regional Council Chair Alan Livingston says the Auckland and Hamilton metropolitan areas could double their population in the next 40 years, and motorways alone will not cope. If it is successful, the service could be expanded with more stops. This is Matthew Tunison.
Pressure is mounting on Auckland Ferry Company Fullers to hand over control of its operations to the council after a terrible few months. Yesterday, hundreds of passengers were left stranded in Devonport after vessels had a mechanical problem. The company is also awaiting sentencing over an incident which left a passenger badly injured. Councillor Chris Darby was out at Devonport Ferry Terminal early this morning handing out flyers for a petition calling for Fullers to lose its exempt status so it's answerable to Auckland Transport.
I think there'll be quite a bit of resistance to the uplifting of the exempt status, because the exempt status that Fullers enjoys probably delivers them a lot more profitability, not having oversight and not having Auckland Transport as a transport regulator knowing what sort of business they do there.
Auckland Councillor Chris Darby. Waikato Tainui and the Kingitanga are not ruling out buying land at Ihumatao in South Auckland to resolve a Maori land dispute. Protesters have occupied the ancestral site for a month now to stop Fletchers from building 480 houses on it. Construction has been put on hold and negotiations are underway between the Kingitanga and Mana Whenua groups to find a resolution. Iwi leader Rahui Papa has shut down claims that the iwi has struck a deal with Fletchers and will be buying the land back imminently. He says no decisions have been made, but it is an option. Long-time campaigners for enhancing Christchurch's red zone have welcomed the approval of a plan for the area's future. The final plan for the 602-hectare Otakaro Avon River corridor in the east of the city was approved by Greater Christchurch Regeneration Minister Megan Woods this morning. The Avon Otakaro network has worked closely with rebuild agency Regenerate Christchurch to develop the plan. Network spokesperson Evan Smith says the group has worked for 8 years to come up with a future for the red zone zone. He says he is happy to accept that the red zone project is intergenerational and says transitional work is already underway.
It isn't going to be something that happens overnight, but so long as we let it unfold and evolve and it's consistent with the plan, then I think we'll get there in the end.
A member of the government's Justice Advisory Group says the resignation of 2 members isn't going to impact on the work that's already been done. Julia Faipoti, who is of Ngāti Porou descent and spokesperson for the advocacy group Just Speak, says the departure of Jared Gilbert and Warren Young is a loss, but it would have been far worse if the resignations had come from Maori members. Mr Gilbert, a gang expert, and Mr Young, a manager at the Independent Police Conduct Authority, quit the Justice Minister's panel in June. Ms Faipoti says Pākehā men are already well represented in the justice system and solutions will be better found by Māori for Māori.
In terms of the membership that left, we lost 2 Pākehā men. And who is in prison?
The final report is due to be delivered next week. A Wellington eco-sanctuary and a restaurant in the capital have been named in Time magazine's World's 100 Greatest Places. Zealandia, which is the world's first fully fenced urban sanctuary, makes it onto the list as a top place to visit. It receives high praise for its groundbreaking conservation work in reintroducing native bird species to Wellington. Hiakai Restaurant, which was established by chef Monique Fiso and specialises in Maori cuisine, is named as a top place to eat. Also included in the magazine's top 100 is Camp Glenorchy on Lake Whakatipu, which is the country's first energy net zero hotel and campground. It's 6:05. The Black Caps bowlers have made some inroads after a wet outfield delayed the start of the day 2 of the second cricket test against Sri Lanka in Colombo. The hosts resumed their first innings on 85 for 2 and were a short time ago 107 for 4 with seamer Trent Boult taking both wickets for the Black Caps. New Zealand must win the match to draw the 2 test series. Meanwhile, the Australian cricketers have some work to do after being bowled out for 179 on the first day of the third Ashes test in Leeds. England will start their first innings on day 2 tonight. The Wellington Phoenix have paid their first ever transfer fee of a reported $160,000 to sign Australian winger Rino Piscopo on a 3-year deal from Italian third division side AC Renata. Phoenix coach Ufuk Talay says he was the player they wanted and they had to pay.
Obviously everything needs to work within budget, so it fell within budget. Every circumstance is different. It would have been probably a lot easier if he was coming off contract. A lot of clubs don't want to pay transfer fees, but in this situation there had to be one paid, so that's the way we went.
Coach Stephen Kearney has told Warriors boss Cameron George to leave comments on rugby league to him after the NRL club CEO threatened to sack players who didn't put in enough effort. Only a faint chance to make the finals. The Warriors play Cronulla in Sydney tomorrow night. Australian Supercars leader, New Zealand's Scott McLaughlin, has posted the fastest lap in the first practice session at the latest round at the Tailem Bend. That's the news.
This week, Country Life has a sweet story.
Clover's a nice runny honey.
We're with a green-fingered beekeeper in Manawatu.
It gets really sticky in here. We did clean the floor last night because we knew you were coming. They do say if you're ever allowed to extract honey in the kitchen, you'll only ever be allowed to do it once. So if you don't like sticky jobs, don't work in a honey shed.
Country Life, Fridays at 9 during nights and Saturday mornings after the 7 o'clock news on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service till midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Central High Country. Rain, possibly heavy, turning to scattered showers tonight, but clearing Bay of Plenty. Isolated thunderstorms about Northland tonight. Whanganui to Kapiti, patchy rain clearing, then fine apart from isolated showers. For Wellington, a few showers clearing tomorrow morning. Gisborne to Wairatapa, scattered rain today, a few showers tomorrow, clearing by tomorrow afternoon. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago, apart from Clutha, mainly fine, isolated showers until early morning. For Clutha and Southland, a few showers retreating to the coast overnight. Bulla to Fiordland, isolated showers until the evening. Scattered showers returning to Fiordland tomorrow morning, spreading elsewhere in the afternoon. Chatham Islands, rain from the evening, possibly heavy, easing to the odd shower later tomorrow. RNZ National, it's 6:08.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint on RNZ National. The ambassador of Ukraine has vowed to track down anyone distributing the accused Christchurch gunman's manifesto and to prosecute them. A neo-Nazi in Ukraine is reproducing the document in paperback and selling it through an online messaging app. Ukraine's ambassador, Dmytro Senik, contacted RNZ after seeing media reports and says law enforcement is now investigating. Ukraine has struggled to deal with far-right vigilante groups springing up in the wake of its ongoing conflict with Russia. But Mr. Senik told our reporter, Annika Smith, it is a peaceful country that doesn't tolerate hate.
What happened in Christchurch in March is absolutely horrible, and Ukraine and the Ukrainian government was among the first to express solidarity and sympathy with the New Zealanders. Ukraine will not tolerate any manifestations of extremism or religious, racial hatred. Ukraine is a multinational country, 42 million nation, where people of different descent, religion, race live in harmony.
So your law enforcement has the tools to prosecute people that hold the manifesto?
Our legislation, including the criminal code, clearly defines that as a crime. So any dissemination of the literature that contains hatred is not acceptable in Ukraine. Since we've learned about supposed dissemination of such a literature from online sources, our law enforcement agencies will have to take some time to check this information. In case it is true, the perpetrators will be brought to justice.
Have you been contacted by the New Zealand government about this?
My ministry was contacted by New Zealand ambassador to Ukraine. So I think it was done immediately after the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, mentioned it.
So does it surprise you to hear that there may be a neo-Nazi reproducing the accused Christchurch gunman's manifesto in your country? Is that surprising to you?
It is very surprising and very shocking. Like I said, it is not something that happens in the Ukrainian society.
Are you expecting law enforcement to report back to you with an update when they know?
I would refrain from giving any time frames for such an investigation, but definitely a professional team of Ukrainian law enforcement agencies will be looking into that.
When we ran stories in New Zealand about this manifesto being reproduced, it was very upsetting, as you'd understand, to a lot of people, particularly the Muslim community. Do you have a message for New Zealanders about what action's being taken in Ukraine at the moment?
My message to our friends in New Zealand would be that Ukraine and New Zealand, our nations, share the same values. Values of democracy, values of tolerance and peace. We have Muslim community in Ukraine. We have other communities in Ukraine too, and we all live in peace. That's why we very much sympathize to Kiwis on what has happened in March in Christchurch. As a matter of fact, there is a Ukrainian community also living in Christchurch, and we believe that the entire world is one big family. So my message is that we share the same values. We are on the same page with New Zealanders. And this is a very disturbing information that would be definitely investigated by the Ukrainian law enforcement.
That is the Ambassador for Ukraine, Dmytro Senik, speaking to our reporter Annika Smith. Back home, pressure is mounting on Auckland ferry company Fuller's to hand over control of its operations to the council after a rough few months. Yesterday, hundreds of passengers were left stranded in Devonport after a vessel had a mechanical issue, while the company awaits sentencing over an incident which left a passenger badly injured. And a petition to give Auckland Transport oversight of the embattled service now has close to 5,000 signatures. Matthew Tunison reports.
David Slack says in 30 years living in Devonport, he's never seen such chaotic scenes at the ferry terminal as he did yesterday.
Yesterday morning was quite possibly the worst I've ever seen. It was consequence of vessels not being available, which often happens in the winter. And I've never seen two parallel queues in and out reach all the way from the wharf to the street. And there were a lot of disgruntled people, and fair enough too.
Fuller's services to and from Waiheke and Devonport are exempt from Auckland Transport's public transport operating model. This means the company can base its services on profitability rather than the needs of public transport users. Auckland Central MP Nikki Kay says there are problems far too often and users are fed up.
It can be so disruptive for work, for family, and, particularly for, I've said before, for elderly and more vulnerable people who might have medical appointments. It can be pretty catastrophic.
Councillor Chris Darby was out at the Devonport ferry terminal early this morning, handing out flyers for a petition calling for Fuller's to lose its exempt status.
First person off was the Chief Executive of Fuller's on damage control to explain and apologise to the commuters, and good on him for fronting up. We'll have to work together to resolve this, but long term, there needs to be a change in the law to get rid of that exempt status.
The petition now has close to 5,000 signatures, and Mr Darby will present it to the Transport Minister in a week or so. If it lost its status, Fuller's would have to meet levels of service determined by the regulator, Auckland Transport.
I think there'll be quite a bit of resistance to the uplifting of the exempt status, because the exempt status that Fuller's enjoys probably delivers them a lot more profitability, not having oversight and not having Auckland Transport as a transport regulator knowing what sort of business they do there.
Maritime New Zealand has confirmed that it is prosecuting Fuller's for a second time, the first being over a 2015 incident in which the Kia ferry crashed into Devonport Wharf, injuring several people. The Herald reports that the latest court action is over a similar incident in 2017 in which a person suffered serious head injuries. Fuller's will be sentenced in October. Fuller's CEO Mike Horn declined to be interviewed today, but a statement from the company says it's commissioned an independent analysis on rolling the Waiheke and Devonport services under the public transport operating model and therefore into Auckland Transport's network. It says that ultimately a decision on its exemption status rests with central government. It says Fuller's recently invested $15 million into two new 400-seat vessels, which are scheduled to go into service this September. For David Slack, it's clear that the only way they're going to get a reliable ferry service is for Fuller's to be answerable to AT.
I just don't see it working well any other way. They've had years and years to demonstrate they could do this better, and they just haven't come to the party. If you know you have a monopoly or something approaching a monopoly, you don't try quite as hard to ensure that your service is as good as it could be. And that's what it feels like to us users.
A statement from Phil Twyford says Fuller's exemption status is currently under review. However, decisions about the exemption will not solve the immediate service issues the ferries are facing. Those are up to Fuller's to resolve. In Auckland for Checkpoint, call Matthew Tunis and Tēnei.
More than 75 prohibited firearms and 200 accessories have been handed in at the latest buyback in Otago today. The event at the Toko Rugby Club in Milton comes a day after the Royal Commission of Inquiry into the Christchurch mosque shootings announced it would extend the submissions period to September 27. But few at today's event were keen to make submissions, as Tess Brunton reports.
An avid target shooter who asked not to be named says he doesn't have anything to tell the Commission, but does have a few firearm changes he'd like to see.
I'd like to see the police routinely armed. I mean, I come from the UK, there's a high terrorist alert over there. I believe the world is changing. So really, this thing today, it's a good thing to get a lot of them off the street. It's just unfortunate that, it's the legal gun holders and the responsible gun holders, they need to come back from the criminals as well.
He says getting rid of a semi-automatic is a no-brainer. But it is a shame for E-category licence holders who previously could own semi-automatics.
But I just think that maybe the people that were E-cat licence holders and responsible licence holders should maybe have been able to keep theirs and just there not be any more sale of those kind of weapons in New Zealand, and through natural attrition eventually those weapons would be gone.
For one Milton resident who asked not to be named, the amnesty was a chance to get one more gun out of the system. He handed in an old gun that used to be his father's, saying the firearm was collecting dust and may not be safe anymore. But he doesn't think the amnesty and gun buyback will keep semi-automatics away.
I'm quite sure there will be a lot of guns go to ground and will appear in time to come illegally. So I just don't know what the future holds for those ones that haven't handed their guns in under this amnesty. Going by what they say now, if anyone is caught with one, there'll be serious consequences for them.
Patrick from Alexandra says he had nothing to add on the commission looking into the shootings in Christchurch, but isn't fully on board with the law changes.
I can't say that I agree with the law change itself. I can see why the law was changed though, so it's been pretty upsetting, but I think the prices that we've received today have been pretty fair, and the help that the police have given me today has been pretty spot on. They've been quite supportive.
He says it feels like responsible gun owners are being punished for the actions of another. While the legislation seems adequate, Patrick suggests a few tweaks.
Where the laws are at the moment, I think are fine. Maybe if they have a look at how people are securing their firearms would be the only thing I'd look at, and the possibility of getting people to either prove that they are trained adequately in firearms use or taking a formal training course in firearms safety.
Another firearm owner, who also asked to remain anonymous, drove about 2 hours from near Cromwell to dispose of his shotgun. He says semi-automatic guns just aren't necessary.
I put 10 deer down in a heap with a five-shot magazine, which wasn't detachable, and then I had to reload. Anyone with a good shot, 3-shot magazine or 2-shot magazine is enough.
The buyback will continue tomorrow. In Milton, ko Tesbrunton tēnei.
It's rained every single day this month in Auckland, but there's one organisation, Watercare, that doesn't want the wet weather to let up yet. Chen Liu reports.
It certainly has been a wet month in Auckland, with our Mongadi station recording 23 rain days during the month of August. Now, a rain day is when we observe at least some measurable rain, 0.1 millimetre or greater. So it's rained almost every single day.
That's Niwa's meteorologist, Chris Brandolino. He says the record number of rain days for any month is 28 days, and this August could be close to or even break that record.
During August, we typically get 20 rain days, or 20 days out of 31, where we get at least some measurable amount of rain. And we've already exceeded that. So even for August standards, this has been a pretty dreary month, either looking at the number of days it has rained or the amount of rain that has fallen.
Mr. Brandolino says the rain might help the city's water supply after a record dry first half of year. But the head of water value at Watercare, Rosalind Klein, says they want more, and ideally it would fall in the Hunua Ranges, where the city's 4 major dams are.
Our water storage level has risen 4% in the dams to 75.7% last week. And while we're really pleased that this is heading in the right direction, the historical average for this time of the year is 89%. So we still have a significant deficit.
Ms. Klein says the volume of rain falling where the dams are has been around normal.
Our 4 dams in the Hunua Ranges are still quite low. The 5 dams in the Waitakere Ranges have recovered and are in good shape, but we're really looking forward to more rain to fall on the Hunua Ranges.
She says the saving water message still applies.
We absolutely still need to be conscious about water, so we would really appreciate if Aucklanders were putting in place water-wise practices that they can maintain over the next few weeks and months to make sure we make the best use of this precious water resource.
The tips Watercare gave include limiting showers to 4 minutes or less, turning taps off when you can, as well as using washing machines and dishwashers less. And if that's not enough, Mr. Brandolino says they are watching the development of a weather system over the Antarctic, which could disrupt our weather through September. The so-called Southern Stratospheric warming event, which scientists are monitoring, could bring cold air up from the southern pole and give us an unsettled spring. Mo te hotaka o te ahiahi nei ko te leo tēnei.
A pair of walkers, 1 casual and 2 pairs of dress shoes. 4's all you need, according to confirmed soul sister Sally Summers, who tomorrow will celebrate 70 years on the shop floor at Saunders Shoes in Greytown, Wairarapa. But Mrs. Summers is delightfully out of step with her own advice.
I do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday and every second Saturday.
Have you ever pulled a sickie?
No.
You can be honest, you know.
I'm honest, I never have.
Never had?
No.
So...
That's the joys of doing something you really like and not having to do it. You don't get up in the morning and think, oh, God, I've got to go to work today. I don't think like that.
You've never, ever had that feeling?
No.
How did you get the job?
Oh, just one of those I applied for it, and I don't know how many applied. Yeah, and I got it.
Tell me about your customers.
Oh, they're lovely. They're all different. And there's not one that I could say, oh, God, here she comes. So I really enjoy that. They've all got a different story, and they enjoy a sit-down and a chat. So it's not pressurised. You don't have to jump up at the stall and more or less say you've bought a pair on your bike.
Have any of them been coming into the store as long as you've been there?
Just about, yes.
I imagine you've seen a few generations through the door.
There is a few come through the door, yes. The mothers, the fathers, and then, although we're out of men's shoes, but we've had the men in as well. But we're into school shoes, so now we're treating the young ones, which is nice.
So talk me through it, Sally. Someone comes in looking for a pair of shoes. What's your approach?
Oh, we usually just say good morning or anything we can help you with. And normally you just end up having a chat. And then sometimes they say, oh, well, I'll try that while I'm here. And we just sit down and have a chat. It's not like a city store where you're a number, you're in and out and gone. All my customers got a lot of names. So it's more a friendly type of store that you know everybody and everybody knows you.
Do you, just in terms of the practicalities in the store there, are you still sort of getting down on the ground and helping people get their shoes on? Are you using the shoehorn and all the rest of it?
It's used a shoehorn, but I never get on the ground. I use a stool, which is a footstool, which I've always done. And I think it's much nicer for the customer too.
How many pairs of shoes do you reckon a person needs?
Probably 4.
How many do you reckon you've got?
I hate to think.
Really?
I've got a few wardrobes.
Are you a bit of a shoe hoarder, Sally?
Only some I really like because we can't wear old-fashioned shoes and we can't wear shoes from seasons gone by, even though we like them. You've got to keep current or you might as well give it up. You're not a good advertisement.
So what's your current shoe favourite? What are you rocking at the moment?
What am I doing? Oh, the Bresleys. Yeah, just a nice classic little shoe with a bit of character to it.
Colour, Sally?
Colour, mainly black with a bit of pewter or silver or something like that in it.
So something
bit of bling.
Something to jazz it up a little bit. Okay, good. Are slippers overrated, do you reckon, Sally?
No, there's people that would like slip. I'm not a slipper person as such, but my girls were always brought up with proper little shoes. They only had slippers after their bath, so we've always been that type of people.
So slippers, not one of the 4 pairs of shoes that we need, you reckon?
No.
Okay.
Well, I suppose it's a necessity. Like people come in and say, I could be going into hospital, I need a pair of slippers, but I think they put them in the bottom drawer.
So tell me, the 4 shoes that you reckon we need, what are they?
Oh, a walker, a casual, and a couple of dress shoes.
But you're not taking your own advice, Sally. You've got a few more than 4 pairs.
I'm advertising.
How do you get to work every day?
Oh, my husband takes in the car.
I
used to walk, but I've given that up with the winter. But no, Alan takes me to work in the car. It's no use leaving the car in the heat all day. So he takes me down and he brings me home.
And he picks you up at night as well?
You what, love?
Picks you up in the evening too, does he?
Yep. Oh, yes, yep. Sometimes we might go out for dinner or call and have a glass of wine somewhere and then come home.
He sounds like a keeper, Sally.
Yeah, he is, yeah.
So with you working, being busy as you are, if you're not going out for a wine and a meal down the road, does he have a good meal on the table for you when you get home?
Certainly, yes. He's improved over the years, but no, he does a good meal.
How many pairs of shoes does your hubby have then?
Oh, God, I hate to think. I've never counted them.
Is he just as bad as you?
No, not now, no. No, he has a pair for dress and a pair for weddings and funerals, I think.
Do you believe, should the handbag match the shoes? What's your call on that?
Yes, it should.
Really?
Yeah.
Controversial call there, Sally.
Well, but then mainly I've got black shoes and I've always got a black handbag, but I have got a few bits and pieces in the wardrobe too. I've never been a handbag sort of person.
Can you give us a bit of advice, Sally, as a woman who gets up and has gone to her job for 70 years, never pulled a sickie and never thought, oh, I can't be bothered with this. How do we get that joy?
Well, just enjoy what you're doing.
Are you ready, Boots?
But I think because you do it because you want to do it, not because you have to do it.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Ukraine's ambassador says anyone distributing a paperback version of the accused Christchurch gunman's manifesto in his country will be tracked down and prosecuted. Local bodies in Waikato have welcomed funding for a new Hamilton to Auckland passenger train service. Long-time campaigners for enhancing Christchurch's red zone are thrilled a regeneration plan has been signed off. Workers at Sanford's Bluff factory are looking forward to big pay rises after voting unanimously to accept a pay offer which includes the living wage for most workers. And Hong Kong is bracing itself for more anti-government demonstrations this weekend. Those are the headlines. Our next news is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
And Kabul will continue despite the pressure from the terrorists.
Lately with me, Karen Hay, is your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
The Papuan struggle for independence